What if hope doesn't require belief in the supernatural? Historically, religions have fabricated hope and resilience through promises of divine reward. But we can consciously build the same psychological strength using biology, reframing, and community. And honestly, if there's no cosmic safety net, then our resilience isn't weaker. It's stronger because it's forged in reality, not conjured up by magical thinking. And that makes it a hell of a lot sturdier than religionists care to admit. Welcome to another bonus edition of the MTB Podcast, a segment of the weekly episode that I call Afterthoughts. This is my favorite part of these weekly presentations because it gives me a chance to dig a little deeper into something that came up during the main episode. So let's start with something uncomfortable. There's a reason that Romans chapter 5 has been important and lasted this long. Paul says suffering produces endurance. Endurance produces character, and character produces hope. And for a believer, that makes perfect sense. Because in their framework, there's a divine editor in the sky who can revise the script whenever he wants. No matter how chaotic things look, the creator of the universe is supposedly weaving it into a meaningful ending. Now, I no longer believe in all of that, but I have to admit that belief is a psychological superpower. If you genuinely believe someone omnipotent is personally invested in your storyline, well, suffering doesn't feel random anymore. Suffering feels purposeful. It feels curated. Even the pain feels a bit supervised. Now, here's the secular problem. When life falls apart for a humanist, there is no cosmic project manager who's tracking everything and knows what's going on. No divine author polishing the rough draft, preparing to give you a better life script. Sometimes that diagnosis is just frickin' bad luck. Sometimes the drought is just climate. Sometimes the job loss is just corporate restructuring. No plan, no script, no cosmic safety net. And that can lead to something psychologists call learned helplessness. The feeling that nothing you do matters. So here's the thesis for this episode of Afterthoughts. We don't need a plan from above to have hope. But we do need the psychological technology that religion used to provide. So in this episode, we're going to hack the benefits of faith using biology, reframing, and community. No divine editing required. Let's dive into that in this episode of Afterthoughts. All right, let's start by talking about hope. Hope it's not just a Hallmark card sort of word. Let's think of hope as chemistry, specifically brain chemistry. When you genuinely believe things will improve, your brain releases dopamine. Dopamine doesn't just make you feel good. It also increases motivation and focus. It helps you look for solutions. It lowers cortisol, the stress hormone that clouds our judgment. Optimism literally makes you better at problem solving. That's why truly believing everything will be okay often makes it more likely that everything will be okay. Not because of magic, but because your brain stays functional. Religion has traditionally used God's will as a reframing tool. You know this. Think about it. Something terrible happens. I don't like it and I don't understand it, but it's part of God's plan. That is nothing more than psychologically reframing something bad into something good that we just don't understand yet. Now, as I've said, I don't buy the whole God has planned everything, so everything happens for a reason, preordained cosmic bullshit. But I do recognize the power of reframing. Humanists don't say everything happens for a reason. We say, I have the agency to create value out of this. We don't try to tell ourselves that, there's automatically value in this. This may not be valuable. It may just be something horrible, but we have the agency to create value out of this. That's Stoic reframing. That's post-traumatic growth theory. It's psychological maturity. It's not pretending that tragedy is good. It's consciously deciding that we will not let something so significant, so potentially life-altering, we will not let it be wasted. And then there's community. Religion doesn't just offer beliefs. It offers pews, built-in gatherings, meals when someone dies. People show up, especially when life throws you a curveball. Isolation is often the enemy of resilience. When you're alone in your suffering, your brain tends to default to catastrophe. When you're witnessed, to use some religious words, when you're witnessed, when others see and feel your pain, cortisol often drops. Oxytocin rises. Your body regulates. So if we're serious about secular resilience, we don't just remove the pews. We replace the pew with a circle. Not with another hierarchy, but with a circle. One that's made up of family, friends, and even acquaintances. I'll discuss that a bit more in a couple minutes. But first, let's address the elephant in the room. Critics of non-religious folks, especially evangelical Christians, will say something like, humanism is fine when things are comfortable, but it fails in the foxhole. Have you heard that one before? Maybe you have. There are no atheists in foxholes. In other words, when bullets are flying or the terrible diagnosis is delivered, people suddenly rediscover God. Interestingly, it's been shown that dire circumstances don't convert atheists or humanists, to religion. In fact, non-religious folks generally perform much better in a crisis because they don't default to prayer and begging for divine intervention. They tend to get hyper-focused on problem solving and figuring out how best to handle the shit they're facing. But I digress. Anyway, yes, religion can be powerful for certain people in times of crisis. It can help them get their emotions in check so they can move forward. But here's the problem. Religious hope can be very fragile. If a seemingly miraculous response doesn't happen, if the healing fails, if the prayers go unanswered, the entire framework can start to collapse. I've seen it happen. I've personally heard people say in anger, I did everything right. Where was God when I needed him? That can be devastating for people, especially when you've been raised to think in terms of divine rewards and divine punishments. Well, this horrible shit that's happening to you definitely isn't a reward. So it must be a punishment. What did I do? I did everything right. Where was God when I needed him? Secular hope is different because it doesn't depend on intervention, divine intervention. Secular hope depends on reality. Secular hope says, this shit is hard. This feels unfair. This is painful. And we are still here. It's anti-fragile. It gets stronger precisely because it expects reality to be messy. Secular hope isn't built on, please rescue me. It's built on the idea that we'll get through this together. That's not weaker than religious hope. It's a hell of a lot sturdier and far more resilient. All right, so let me get practical. I'd like to explain a few tools that you can use to help you get through difficult times without needing to believe in the supernatural or count on divine intervention. And I'll be publishing this as a separate blog post, probably called something like the Humanist Resilience Toolkit. So keep an eye out for that. But before I dive into the specific tools and practices, I want to circle back, pun intended, to this idea of circles that I mentioned earlier. When we were talking about the fact that religion offers community, or at least people in the pews around us, I mentioned that humanists need to replace that with something. You can't just eliminate the pews and the community along with them. You need to replace that somehow. And I suggested creating a circle. The circle is, think of it as the secular humanist alternative to religious community. And let's face it, most people in large churches are not part of a community other than in the sense that they worship together at the same time in the same location. Even at the parish where I was the director of youth ministry for 12 years, the true community was probably around 50 active parishioners out of about 2,000. And within those 50 people, there were actually a handful of smaller, closer communities. The fact that no one ever addressed, though, was that the overwhelming majority of people were attendees. They weren't truly part of the parish community. Regardless, a secular humanist circle is an intentional, non-hierarchical gathering where the primary text being studied is not a text at all. It's the lived experience of the people present. The circle is a relational safety net. Now, in a religious context, if you lose your faith, you often lose your community. You lose your place in the pews. In a humanist circle, the bond is based on mutual human commitment, meaning it remains intact regardless of what you believe or don't believe. This commitment should be characterized by radical equality. No one is the authority in the circle. The wisdom is distributed among all the members of the circle. It should be characterized by active witnessing. Instead of praying for someone, the group witnesses their struggle, offering presence and maybe tangible help if that's what's needed. The commitment to the circle is also characterized by vulnerability. That's sort of the currency that you use within the circle. The goal isn't to look righteous. The goal is to be honest about the thirst we discussed when we talked about the gospel reading in our main episode this week. Now, I'll be sharing more about humanist circles in the future, but I wanted to give you this brief explanation for now. All right, so let's get back to the task at hand, which is to run through a few tools and tactics for you to try. First up is what we'll call the control audit. This one is very straightforward, and it's something that I do through my daily journaling. When a crisis hits, right, sit down, alone or with someone from your circle, if you have a circle, and draw 2 columns. Column 1, what is outside your control? And then in column 2, put what is within your control. And this moves your brain from panic mode to problem-solving mode. Most of us tend to default to all the shit that's beyond our control. Well, this control audit helps adjust our focus to what we can control, to focus on the actions that we can take. Look, when my wife was diagnosed with breast cancer, everything felt out of control. I was still a believer at the time, and it felt like God was giving us the middle finger and cackling like a Bond villain. That all changed when we sat down and asked, what do we control? Well, we controlled scheduling appointments. We controlled nutrition and activity levels. We controlled the treatment plan and how we were going to face the likely side effects of chemo. We didn't control the cancer, the surgery, or how effective the treatment would ultimately be, but we did control almost everything else. And that created hope and it made us more resilient. So doing a control audit like this identifies what to stop focusing on. Those things you don't control, and helps you focus your time and energy on the things you do control. It can help you move from chaos to Exodus mode. Strike the rock. Stop griping about the desert. All right, our second tool is what we'll call vent space. So religion has prayer, which believers often use as a way to lament all the bad shit that they're experiencing. In essence, it's a religious form of venting. Humanism needs some sort of ritualized or formalized venting too. So create a vent space. Now, this should be a place and time where you can simply blow off steam in whatever way helps you the most. But it has to be more than purely physical. So going for a hard run helps some people, but to turn it into a vent space, run with a friend you can talk to about what's going on. Make it clear from the start that you just need to vent, that you want to physically blow off some steam, and that you just need an ear to bend. If you're not athletic, then invite someone over for a drink. But set the expectation ahead of time that you need to talk and you just like them to listen. The goal with this is not to fix anything at that moment. The goal is to simply allow another human being to witness the pain you're feeling. No advice needed, no theology wanted, just their presence. Just like the conversation that Jesus and the Samaritan woman had at the well, this should be human to human. All right, the third tool. Reflect on evolutionary providence. Replace divine providence, the belief that everything in the universe was created and continues to be guided by a divine presence. Replace that divine providence with evolutionary providence, which is the belief that the miracle of our existence isn't supernatural. It's natural, and that makes it far more amazing. We are the product of 4 billion years of ancestors who survived ice ages, plagues, wars, droughts, predators, famine. That resilience is not metaphorical. It's cellular. So to help you reflect on this idea of evolutionary providence, I'd like to do a short guided reflection with you. Now, if you're in a place where you can safely do so, then please close your eyes for this. Now, if you're listening to this while you're driving, walking, or operating heavy machinery, well, keep your eyes open. Right? Be wise about it. But this brief meditation is called The Legacy of Ancestors. And as I said, if you're able to safely do so, go ahead and close your eyes. Now, take a deep breath. For a moment, set aside the weight of your to-do list and the anxieties of the coming week. We're going to step out of the frantic now and into the long view of your own existence. Take another deep breath. But as the air enters your lungs, realize that this simple act, breathing, is a victory. You are the living tip of a spear that has been flying through time for 4 billion years. Think back through your own family line. Think of your parents, your grandparents, and the thousands of nameless faces that came before them. They lived through the Black Death. They survived the Great Depression. They endured winters without heat, migrations across oceans, and the terrors of wars that erased cities and sometimes entire societies. Every single one of your direct ancestors was a survivor. If even one of them had given up, if even one of them had lacked the grit to find water in the stone, you would not be sitting here today. This is not a miracle from outside of you. This is the providence of biology. Resilience is not something you have to go out and find. Resilience is something you already are. It is written into your DNA. You are made of the literal atoms of stars and the refined strength of survivors. When you feel like you have nothing left, remember that you are carrying the living water of 4 billion years of successful adaptation. You are the dream of your ancestors realized. Now, bring your mind back to the specific desert that you are facing today. The stress at work, the strain in your relationships, the fear of the unknown. Look at that problem through the eyes of the millions who came before you. They didn't have a divine safety net, and neither do you, but they had each other, and they had their own ingenuity. Feel the strength in your spine. That is the same spine that stood upright on the savannah for the first time. Feel the pulse in your wrist. That is the same blood that refused to stop pumping through 1,000 crises. You are not a victim of circumstance. You are a master of survival. When you open your eyes a few moments from now, don't look for a sign from above. Look at your own hands. They are the tools. Look at the people around you. They are the well that can provide you with living water. Take one final deep breath and exhale the need for a miracle. Inhale the reality of your own power, a power that comes from 4 billion years of successful adaptation and survival. When you're ready, open your eyes. When a crisis hits, and another one will eventually, reflect on this. Reflect on the fact that you are the product of 4 billion years of successful adaptation and survival. Whatever it is, you can get through it. Now, let's see if we can tie this into daily life with 3 simple experiments. Experiment number 1, help people with what I'll call third way reframing. Right? When someone shares a struggle, don't say, it's God's plan. But also don't say, wow, that sucks. So, the first way is to chalk it up to divine will and hope for the best. The second way is to act sympathetic and leave it at that. The third way can help people see things from a different angle. It can help them reframe. So it's called third way reframing. To do this, ask the person, well, what strength have you used before that we can apply here? That question alone can rewire some of that helplessness into agency. Because in the midst of a current crisis, people often forget the personal strengths that served them in the past and helped them survive before. All right, experiment number 2. Try having an occasional common well night. Invite someone different out for a drink. And by different, I mean the Samaritan in your life. This common well calls back to the story we read in the main episode from the Gospel of John about Jesus at the well talking to the Samaritan woman. Right? So invite someone out for a drink, right? A Samaritan in your life. Now, here are the ground rules, though. No politics, no theology, just shared human thirst, parenting stress, health anxiety, career fatigue. There are countless serious topics to discuss without tackling all of the hot button issues. Now, the goal here is to experience what connection feels like when we set our ideology aside. All right, experiment number 3. Start keeping an endurance log. This is a simple one if you do it in the moment. Keep a notebook about what you've endured, but focus on how you did it. So every time your family survives a hard week, write down how you did it. Have a rough day at work? Write down how you survived it. Something really shitty happens, make detailed notes about how you made it through. Now, you might be thinking, but what if I didn't handle it well? What if I'm still miserable and don't know what to do? So my answer is that if you can still pick up a pen and write in your notebook, then you have survived. You've made it through another day of whatever crisis you're facing. If you didn't do it perfectly, that's fine. No one's perfect. But it worked. You made it through, so write it down. Over time, that notebook becomes sort of your personal scripture of resilience. It's proof that you can do this. It's documented evidence. You don't need a miracle because you've already survived. All right, here's what I believe to be true. Religion gives people a sense of cosmic supervision. But what actually sustained them was biology, reframing, and community. You see, like I said, hope is chemical. It's brain chemistry, which means hope is something we evolved to have. And resilience? Resilience can be trained. It's something that we have the mental and emotional capacity to learn. But maybe most importantly, I believe that connection is medicinal. We have evolved to cooperate and feel empathy for one another. In fact, it's likely what helped us evolve and thrive as a species. I don't believe we need some sort of divine safety net, and I certainly don't believe we have one. What we need is each other. We need our own agency. We need circles instead of pews. And we need to remember that survival has never been about miracles. Survival has always been about humans who refused to quit. That's not a placebo, and it's not wishful thinking. When we truly understand that, when we truly understand that we are the result of 4 billion years of successful adaptation and survival, and we don't need divine permission from an unprovable God in order to keep surviving and thriving, that is real power. Thanks for joining me for this episode of Afterthoughts. If you want to keep up on everything I'm doing, please head over to thecodaproject.com and subscribe to my newsletter. You'll get notifications whenever I publish anything, and I'll keep you updated on the weekly live streams of mythologizing the Bible. If you subscribe for free over at the Coda Project, you'll start receiving my publication called The Weekly Compass. This is a brief guide on a single core value, and think of it as a mini lesson plan for personal growth. It's perfect for families, students, and adults because I include discussion questions designed for each age group. As a subscriber, you'll also have access to the Guide to Kitchen Table Activism, which is a detailed resource designed to help you be politically active from your own home. The guide explains why activism is important, the philosophy behind kitchen table activism, and the foundational values it supports. before laying out how to use the tools you have to make your voice heard. It provides tools, tactics, and templates for you to use, and it only takes 15 minutes a week. If you care about our democracy, our country, and our world, then I encourage you to check it out. And while you're at it, make sure you hit the subscribe button so that you'll start receiving my newsletter called The Kitchen Table Activist. Thanks again for listening. Until next time, remember to question everything, keep what's good, and live what matters.